Eddie DeGarmo, we're here in the studio at Full Circle Music on the Made It Music podcast. Thanks for being here with us today.
It's wonderful to be here with you guys.
This is, I'm so excited about this episode. I know Stacy's been super excited about it, and she's normally not one of the co-interviewers on our podcast, but I thought she has to do it today.
She helps us look better. I mean, let's face it.
That was the main reason. But because you guys have had a long, working relationship together, and she has just talked so much about you over the years, so I was like, she's going to have an entirely different angle on your story than probably I would even.
She's got the dirt. Yeah.
She's got the dirt, basically. She'll know the right questions to
Use
ask.
that against you.
That's right.
But not only that, but because really, I mean, where I'm at in Christian music today and where Full Circle is largely, very influenced by what you did and what you created in terms of blazing a trail for what is currently our industry and really influenced everything. And so I've been really excited about that because you're not just in the middle of a career. You've went through the arc of artist, music executive, and now you're on the other side of it. So
I was confused. I couldn't decide which was going to be, at the moment. So
yeah, but I love it. So let's just dive straight in. So what was your first dollar that you ever made in the music business?
Well, to go way, way back, because I think we have to go there to talk about our first dollar. Probably the first dollar I ever actually made in the music business was I trick-or-treated at Graceland, and Elvis Presley gave me a signed dollar bill.
The Elvis.
The Elvis, and who knows when it was, a long time ago. And me, like any other 6-year-old little punk, I went out and spent it the next day. So that was the first dollar I made in the music business.
Somebody has that sign.
That's incredible.
But my mother played piano in our church back in the north. When I was in Detroit in those years, and she started me on piano when I was 3. My family moved to Memphis in the late 50s, and I grew up in Memphis, influenced by all the different music, that was going on. And Memphis was like a mecca in those days for music. You had Stax Records with artists like Otis Redding and Sam and Dave, and and then you had Al Green and those guys over at High Records. And I started my first dance band when I was 10. And it's a pretty cool story, actually, because people say, how'd you get started in Christian music? Well, for me, it started at the West Memphis Dog Track. My dad, the good Baptist, went over one night and won $1,200 and took me out the next day and bought me a Farfisa organ.
Wow.
Well, I think his ulterior motive was I'd started playing drums and I was driving the family crazy. And they were like, we got to do something with this kid. So they bought me an organ. And because it was a really cool keyboard, I think still is probably, I started getting invited to be in bands with kids that were a lot older than me, and they were high school and even beyond. And so I started playing dances from the time I was 10 or 11. And
so you were the kid with a cool organ.
I was I don't know if I knew how to play very well, but I could, chord a little bit.
Yeah.
And so that's where I started, and I've never done anything in my life significant other than music as far as a business or a career goes. Signed my first deal when I was 15 with a major.
So that's unheard of. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, it was with High Records, which was a subsidiary of London Records, which London was a huge company, mainstream company that had groups like the Rolling Stones and ZZ Top and all those kind of groups back in those days. And High was their affiliate in Memphis, which had Al Green, which was like tearing it up, with like #1 songs. And they signed our band, which in my band was Dana Key and 8 others. We were a 10-piece soul band.
Holy cow.
We had 4 horn players, and stuff. And funny, neither Dana or I sang. There were other singers. We started singing when we formed our first Christian group because we couldn't find anybody else to sing. So that's the way that worked. So we signed our deal and worked on a couple records, had 145 that was played around town, because 45s were big deals in those days. That's a single in today's vernacular.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, we call them 45s. And so, when I was 17, just kind of, unbeknownst, I had this wake-up call with God and dedicated my life to Christ. And it was an interesting day because it was a fellow named Dallas Holm, who's a singer, acoustic singer, and an evangelist named David Wilkerson that were doing a thing in town that my older brother invited me to, and I hadn't been involved in church in a long time. And so I went, and I was touched that day, but not really. That was in the morning. The afternoon, I went to a music festival and saw all my friends, and they were definitely all ripped and high and all that sort of thing. And it was like, really? This is different. And I went back to church that night and made a decision to dedicate my life to Christ. I didn't know what that meant. I actually went home and was like so freaked out about it. I'm not an emotional guy necessarily, but I cried at my bed because I knew that God was going to make me quit my band.
Wow.
And I was bummed out. I was like, God, do we have to do this? And so over the next few months, that became apparent that things had changed for me. And I went back to school the next day and saw my friend who played guitar in our band, Danny Key. And I said, Danny, you're not going to believe what happened. I said, I found Jesus. And he goes, I didn't know he was missing, man. So, you know what I mean? Which was a good thing to say. And so I said, yeah, man, I'm serious. And we skipped school. And, and so I went and told him what happened to me. Yeah. I didn't know I wasn't supposed to skip school in those days. So we skipped. And I, told him what had happened the day before. And it turned out he was going through a lot of the same weird stuff that, that we were going through in those days. We were probably not any different than what young people go through today, but it was the late 60s, early 70s, and it was a very tumultuous time in our country, if you will. And so a lot of confusion.
Yeah.
And we were products of all that. And so our entree to Christian music was really organic. It wasn't like, hey, man, we're going to form a Christian band. It was like we started writing songs that reflected how we felt. And, that's what writers do. That's what artists sing about. They sing, hip-hop people write about the street. Country people write about pickup trucks or whatever. Pop artists write about, boy-girl songs. Or, well, I won't go. You know what I mean? So, Christian artists, I think are driven to write about their values and their faith. And we've made an industry grow up around that, which sometimes can be confining to some artists, because I remember just total sidebar, DC Talk. We were working on I think it was their third album, and they had never been on the radio, and they had covered an old song called Lean On Me. Lean on me. Yeah. And they were like, can't we get the radio to play that? And I said, not unless we go in and do some ad-libs on it, help us, Father, we love you, Jesus. And they said, stuff like that. And they said, that's so cheesy. And I said, yeah, kind of. But I said, if we want to reach out and shake hands with these people, that's what it's going to take. And so we did it all, and it all worked.
Man, I want to revisit that part of the conversation, because in that little 30-second story about that is pretty huge, and how most artists never quite learn to navigate that balance. So I do want to come back to that. But I guess it sounds like, because you were 15 years old when you got your first record deal, were you ever not full-time in it? Or was it just kind of from the beginning?
Well, full-time in music, I think for a lot of us that do that, or in the arts or in theater or in anything that's one of those types of pursuits, for a lot of us is bivocational or trivocational. You play music because you love it, but you do something else to eat, if you will. And I was playing in dance bands all through high school, but I was also working at a men's clothing store, which I didn't necessarily like that much, but I did. I was actually voted best dressed in my high school, believe it or not. What happened? What happened to me? Well, it's because I had to go to work wearing what I go to school rather wearing what I had to go to work in. Yeah. And so, but yes, I've played music my entire life, and when I wasn't playing music, I was trying to figure out how to. But I've done a lot of things. My dad was a home builder, which turned into really something that was handy because, I knew how to do stuff with my hands and, work on houses and stuff like that, which proved invaluable in the early days of Christian music because it was a trade that I could come and go at. And, I could paint houses or build somebody a porch and then go out and play concerts,
Yeah.
And so that worked out.
Interesting. Man, so there's this whole... I resonate a lot with your story because I feel somewhat the same. I never achieved nearly the level of influence or success as an artist as you did, but in terms of being entrepreneurial and having all these different facets or pursuits, like it just doesn't seem like one thing of it was like enough. So you obviously went through, maybe take us through, DeGarmo and Key, and then what happened after that to transition you from artist to
the label guy?
Yeah.
Well, when we formed DeGarmo and Key, which I still to this day can't believe that we chose that as a name,
It worked. It worked really well.
Yeah. It was like kind of complicated. There's a whole nother story about that too. But when Dana and I became Christians, we were still in our mainstream dance band that was signed to London, and that stayed going for about another 3 months until we just drove them nuts, and they, didn't want us around anymore. So. When we first left, High in London had options to us because we were signed, and so they wanted to hear our music, and so we recorded some demos and sent them to them, and they were like, man, how do we sell this stuff, because it's about God. We don't know how to do that, so they released us. Dana and I really didn't know there was much of an industry for Christian music. In fact, the only thing that we knew much about in Memphis in those days was Southern gospel groups. They had cool suits. And,
yes. And they dressed well.
They dressed well. They had cool hair. A lot of times they matched the suits,
True.
And they had tour buses, which was an anomaly, but that was really all we knew much about Christian music. And then Dana, one day, we were living in a one-bedroom apartment, 3 of us, and we had our beds lined up like army barracks in Midtown Memphis. And we had formed a band, and because we were so humble, we called ourselves the Christian Band. We didn't take a name.
That was literally the name?
That was the name, the Christian Band. And the guy that had signed us to High really liked us, and he had a big studio room downtown in the ghetto of Memphis, and he let us rehearse there. And it was a converted furniture store, so it was a big open space. And over a period of about 3 or 4 months, the young people around Memphis heard that there was a Christian group that was playing every Wednesday and Thursday night at this little furniture store. So they started showing up. And first it was a couple people, then it was dozens, and then it was hundreds, And it just all happened because we couldn't find anybody to hire us. We went out and tried to play the bar circuit and figured out that maybe didn't work as good as we thought it might. And just a little sidebar on that. I mean, I've worked with a lot of artists that want to approach the mainstream that way. And I'm like, well, if it's your calling to be a mainstream, I said, don't feel guilty about that at all. But I said, going to a bar and preaching from stage is not really why people come there, And I said, if you're looking for success in your calling and in your ministry, I said, I think you might be more successful sitting at the bar stool and just talking to people, because you're paid to do a certain musical thing, especially if unless you're known. I mean, if you're a known group and people buy tickets to come see you, that's different. But if you're just getting going. The bar circuit can be tough for a Christian group that is vocal about their faith, I think.
Yeah.
Having been one that's done it.
Yeah. Man, so Rebel for God. I guess, we were talking a little bit about this before, but just the idea of it being called, even devil music at the time, like, was that a thing that...
Yeah, and it was, it was a consequence that we never thought about when we first started writing music, the only kind of music that we knew how to play was rock music. We had grown up in rock bands, Dana and I both, and our drummer that was with us at the time, and bass player, and it was in the days of Jimi Hendrix and Led Zeppelin and, all that kind of stuff. And so it was never a decision, well, we're going to play rock music. It was just what came out. I guess maybe if we'd have lived in a different town or a different part of the country, something else might have emerged, So we had no idea the controversy that we would have first in the bar circuit, and turned into really a great, I think, testimony in that a lot of our old friends that knew us from when we were in our Main Street group before we knew Christ were impacted by that, And a lot of them really, made decisions and dedicated their lives to Christ through that experience. And then when we started playing churches, oh my gosh, all hell broke loose. we had no idea, the minefield that we had stepped on there. And I mean, I got thrown out of a lot of places, man. I've had tomatoes thrown at me.
Literally.
Oh yeah, literally. I've had cabbages thrown at me, and just shut down in places that I don't want to go into in this interview, but you would recognize.
Wow.
Universities and different things like that. And I've looked back on that, and I said, well, that was painful. But then it was the impetus. It was kind of the thing that God used, I think, to popularize this whole art form, because the newspaper writers and the magazine writers ate that stuff up. It was obviously way before the internet, but so they would always write about, well, can you sing about Jesus and play rock music, And they would kind of leave it open, but they loved it. Maybe it's like, trying to turn your eyes away from a car wreck.
Yeah.
You can't do it. But those newspapers and magazines popularized a lot of what we were doing. And in those days, I mean, there was really only a handful of us that we began to learn about from Memphis. Petra was about a year before us, and they were doing it up in Indiana. And then there was Resurrection Band, they called them in those days, from Chicago. And then the West Coast movement, and this is certainly not disrespectful in any sense, but that movement to me was more acoustic-based music than it was, wah-wah pedals and
it wasn't rock based
solos and all that sort of thing. So we got thrown out of a lot of places, but it actually turned out good. I've been to my own record burnings and offered to sell the people burning records copies.
Really?
I said, you're going to burn them, man. Buy some more.
Here's more.
Yeah, I'll help you.
It's like $5
each,
right? Yeah.
That's a way to sell a CD, I guess.
Freaked them out.
Man, even just that.
It's just amazing.
I mean, how many artists do we know that could legitimately say they've had cabbages thrown at them or tomatoes thrown at them or records literally set on fire? I mean,
it was a different day. I mean, we were on the edge of a cultural movement that, a lot of people didn't understand. And it's, we weren't the first. I mean, you go all the way back to the 50s and Elvis Presley shaking his hips on TV, And so it goes way before us, but I don't know that all that's a bad thing, actually. I think it's an all right thing that we as Christians in the church are at least wary about certain cultural movements, and we should, try to find the truth in them and all that sort of thing. But if you ask yourself the question, what kind of music does God like? I mean, that's a pretty deep well. Does he like the Western tone structure more than the Eastern tone structure? Does he like country more than rock? Does he like non-lyrical music, the classics more than he likes lyrical music? I mean, basically, that's a circular question, because you find yourself, well, I guess he can like anything that's not against, what he's there for.
Wow.
And whether it's mainstream or Christian based, and I mean those can be questions that can take different paths. I can only imagine that song, most of us would say was a Christian song, but it was widely played on mainstream radio. You know, Jesus Take the Wheel. I mean, you know, and there's, you know, Spirit in the Sky. I mean, my gosh, it goes all over the place. And if you are one that has read the Bible or studies it at all, you can talk about any subject. My gosh, you can talk about, you know, wars and peace and, you know, love and hate, and I mean, you can go anywhere you want to do. I think it's all about your perspective and as a writer and how you portray those things. At the end of the day, gives a definition. I often tell artists, I said, you know, in Jesus' day, there were no Bible publishers and there were no Christian record companies. So what did he think about them?
Yeah.
You know?
Sure.
Yeah.
So, you know, and it's, for some, it's become a profit center, which I understand that. You know, we all want to feed our families and make a living. But I'm not sure in a world that's not a fallen world, I don't know that we would have Christian labels and Christian Bible publishers the same way that we do today. It's because that we live in a fallen world.
What do you mean by that? Because that's a pretty deep.
It's pretty deep. Well, what I mean by that, if you take a look at the advent of the Christian record company, you know, I think the oldest one, modern oldest one, is probably a better way to say that, would be the Benson Company. You know, they were like 1903. You know, at one time they were the largest music publisher in Nashville, you know, and then became a record company and that sort of thing. So, you know, pretty new business. In the 40s and 50s, mainstream companies did a lot of Christian music products and signed a lot of Christian music albums. Tennessee Ernie Ford, the Chuckwagon Gang, the Blackwood Brothers, all those artists in those days were, you know, on a mainstream Columbia Records, RCA Records, whatever, you know, Warner Brothers. And in the early 60s, I think, with the, what they call it, the counterculture revolution, the mainstream companies stopped doing those kinds of products so much. And so a need arose for a solution to get that kind of music out to the public. And so, you know, in the late 50s and early 60s, Word Records and Benson Records started creating those products. And they kind of grew into this siloed business that didn't used to exist quite the same way that it did during the 70s and 80s and 90s. Now, the interesting thing about the Christian music business today is it's mostly owned, the large ones, by the entertainment companies, the large entertainment companies, you know.
So in a way, it's kind of gone back to that.
It's kind of gone back to that in a different way, to where they have business units that focus on that.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
And I mean, I worked in the mainstream music business for many years and had a lot of people that I worked with that were from different backgrounds, Jewish, a lot of them, you know. And I asked my boss one time in New York, I said, why do you do Christian music? Why is that? He goes, Eddie, he said, it's like good, clean fun, man.
Good, clean fun.
You know, but I started thinking about what he was saying, and then he added on to it later. He said, look, man, he said, we go through so much madness in the mainstream, you know, with some of the artists and some of the different stuff. And he said, and you know, you guys don't cause us any grief on that level, you know. And so as long as you make your numbers and your goals, I've never been asked to do anything from the mainstream that I felt was a compromise, except for one time, with my faith. You know, the artist Prince did a record in the mid-'90s that at the time EMI wanted to take to Christian radio, and came and talked to me about it. And I told my boss at that time, man's name was Charles Koppelman. I said, Mr. Koppelman, you're my boss, and I'll do what you ask me to do, you know, because I respect you that way. But I said, I want you to know, if we do this, it's going to seriously, I I think, wound the integrity of my business. Because we have relationships at media and at radio, and all of our buddies are going to say, well, why are you promoting somebody that obviously doesn't promote Christian values at that time? Nothing against Prince, but he didn't come from that place, And so he's like, really? And I said, yeah. I said, if we take that out there, I said, there's going to be a lot of backlash, so you got to be ready for it. But if you want me to do it, I'll do it.
Wow.
He's like, well, I would never ask you to do anything that would hurt your business. He said, I had no idea. Forget I ever asked.
Wow. Wow.
But that's the only time I've ever been asked that question.
Why would they want to take Prince to Christian radio? I mean,
He had a couple gospel songs or pseudo gospel songs on his album. It was a record called Emancipation in the late 90s.
Yeah.
And
He did end up cutting a Nicole Nordeman song.
there you go.
Wow. So let's transition into your time, obviously, as a record exec, because I don't want to monopolize the conversation. I know Stacy's sitting over there probably with a billion questions as she's been going through your book and everything. So maybe you can kind of transition us into that
Yeah,
era.
I would love to just know about what that transition was like from DeGarmo and Key to deciding to start Forefront Records.
We have to go back before Forefront to understand that. I started producing records, when I was a teenager, and kept doing that along DeGarmo and Key. I'd come home from tour and produce records in the studio. And Dana did some of that too. I didn't do it all alone. And I had a production company in the late 70s, early 80s called Mint, M-I-N-T, Mint Productions. And we were producing stuff on Gary Chapman and Farrell and all different kinds of groups, big 80s groups, And so the record business, I felt like, was a natural extension out of some of the things that I knew. But in the late 80s, when we formed Forefront, there were 4 of us originally. Our mission was, at that point in time, to focus on reaching the MTV generation. Because, MTV, when it first came on the scene, galvanized an age group of people, Not so much the same anymore, but did then. And so we wanted to make music that reached that demographic. And there wasn't really anybody at that time that was focused totally on that demographic. You had the big record companies like Word and Benson, and I'm trying to think, Sparrow maybe was the other one. In those days, it was before the Provident. The Provident is kind of built on the ashes of Benson. That's where that came from. So we focused on music that we felt like reached our generation, and thus founded Forefront. It was 5 years into the business before I told anybody that I was an owner, because I was still chasing my artist career. And in those days, I didn't feel like it was cool to mix those things together. In today's world, there's a lot of artists that want to boast about, their labels and that sort of thing. But I wanted to keep it quiet because I didn't want any of our artists to feel competitive with my own career, if you will.
Wow.
That's cool.
And my job, because we were at the peak of our career, our artist careers, I toured the groups. DC Talk was on the road with us at the peak of our career for 2 years, which was, they did the work, but we allowed them to have the platform, which helped them grow into what they are now. And so I did that with several artists, Audio Drilling, different ones.
Yeah.
But I didn't want them to know that I owned the label, because I felt like, why go there? Just, make it clean.
That's amazing to me.
So,
I did not know that part of the story.
I didn't tell anybody.
How did that come out?
I finally came out with it. Well, we were in Memphis. Dana and I lived in Memphis at the time, and we formed Forefront in late 87. And about 91, 92, we were ending our record commitment with the Benson Company, DeGarmo and Key was, and Forefront had grown. We had released the DC Talk album to great success, and we had released ETW. We'd signed Jeff Moore. He had a big song called A Friend Like You, and there were a couple more. And so the label was growing and growing and growing. And D&K, I felt like, was doing really good. We were still doing extremely well. But I didn't know if I could see another 10 years of that or another 15 years of that. So I felt like, and started thinking like, that maybe it was time for me to transition. And so when our record contract ended in 92 or 3, when something right along there, Benson came to us and wanted us to re-sign another album commitment, for 3 albums or something like that. And, and it was really good for us financially, but I felt like that I never really wanted to be the old boxer that was always trying to regain his title, if you will. And so I stepped away when things were still really good and went full-time into the record business and moved my family from Memphis to Nashville. Wow. Franklin specifically. Yeah. In 92.
Wow.
June 1st of 1992, and I went into the label and said, "Hey guys, guess what? I've been here all along. You just didn't know it."
That is so hilarious. I'm sure I'm just trying to picture the reaction to that.
Yeah, Toby Mac, he's like, I knew something was up. He said, "You talking us on all those music festivals and stuff. I knew something was up."
So
amazing.
Who did you start it with? Who founded it with you? Because was it you and Dana?
It's me and Dana and a fellow named Ron Griffin and our manager, Dan Brock, the manager of D&K. And Dana only stayed in that business for about a year. He just, it wasn't cut out to suit his gifts, really. And so we bought him out of it probably about a year in, and Ron Griffin probably about 2 years in. And so the rest of the time it was Dan and me that did all that. So
how did you, I guess at the time you had enough success off of DeGarmo and Key where you guys were just sort of self-funding everything and it was your investment? And
well, the way that there's a story behind that. In 1986, I guess, maybe 87, D&K was the top-selling group at the Benson Company, and we were out of our contract. And Benson had fallen on some difficult times. They had been purchased by a big book publisher called Zondervan. And there was, anytime somebody buys another company, there's 2 or 3 years of adjusting and this and that and trying to figure all that out. And they had lost a couple of their really big artists, Sandy Patty, Carmen, we were their top act. And they were a little bit on the ropes as a record business. And so they came to us and they said, the industry was trying to woo us away. Word was trying to sign a Sparrow, a couple more, And so we did an interesting deal with Benson. They said, "Look, we understand why you would want to leave. So, but what would it take you to stay?" And I said to him, and it wasn't all my idea, but I was able to deliver the idea. I said, "Well, just give us back all of our records and our publishing, and we'll figure out a way to stay." And they were like, "Well, let's talk through that."
Yeah.
So we got back all of our D&K masters and all of our songs from the beginning. And we kind of had some hurdles that we had to deliver some records to get some records, deliver some records to get some records, and that's what we've hammered out. But Forefront was founded on us taking that D&K catalog and licensing it internationally because we had all the international rights immediately. And we made deals in Canada and in Europe and Australia and some other places. And that was what we funded Forefront with.
Wow. Yeah, super smart. I mean,
That's how that worked.
Who was the brand? I mean, I guess like obviously somebody has to be thinking in terms of those type of deals. Is that naturally your way of?
Not all mine. I mean, Dan Brock, our manager, was good at that sort of thing, and I have to give him credit for some of that vision early on. You know, I was still wearing striped pants and a pirate coat, you know, bouncing around stage in those days. So, you know, he taught me a lot, but I was also the guy, and I think you'll probably get this, but, you know, even though I got to write, you know, half the songs or more or whatever through our career, I was always the guy trying to figure out how to get another tank of gas to get to the next town, you know. And I was the guy that went to Dan and said, you know, hey, other bands sell T-shirts. Have you ever thought about that?
Yeah.
He's like, no, man, we can't do that. I mean, that's a true story. He's like, that's like ego. And I said, well, yeah, but like we're in a rock band. I mean, you know.
You're already an ego.
Yeah, we're already an ego. So anyway, so I was definitely bent towards the business side from an early age, but the structure of Forefront, Dan and Ron Griffin both were business guys, and so they helped direct some of our early steps that way.
That's awesome.
It's incredible. So then from Forefront to Capitol, to EMI Christian, then to Capitol. Tell us a little bit more about.
Well, Forefront just grew and grew and grew, and it grew very fast, and we became the largest independent Christian record company in the world at the time. And then, lo and behold, across the block, you know, Jars of Clay releases Flood, and it's a huge success, of course. And so all of our artists started coming to me and like, hey, man, you know, can't we be on mainstream radio too? I mean, seriously, that was what was going on. And I'm like, well, maybe, but you know, we're not really geared for that. You know, we can get you on this kind of radio and that kind of radio and this video and that kind of video, but we're not a mainstream company. And the mainstream businesses at that time, it was one of their huge things that they pitched. One of their big ones is like, hey, you know, if your music suits the mainstream, we can help you get there. And as an artist, I mean, you always want to reach the most people. I mean, that's just a natural thing that you do. So it was very intriguing. I felt that we needed to partner with a mainstream company, at least, if not become part of a mainstream company early on, to serve our artists where they wanted to go. Because we were selling platinum and gold records on several of our roster, and we wanted to take them to the next level. So I began, you know, gently suggesting that we become part of a bigger entity. And that was about a 2-year process, and a painful process to some degree, because we had built Forefront not to sell it, but it was just the business climate changed so dramatically around us. We felt like that was the best thing to serve our artist community. That was really the driver for me.
How was it painful in that process?
Well, I felt like I wanted to move it on, and my partner at first did not. You know, he was like, no, man, I don't ever want to do that. And I'm like, well, you know, we're going to have a hard time retaining these artists, and we're going to have a hard time attracting new artists, because it was such a big part of the industry in those days. Not totally, I don't want to blame Jars of Clay, but, you know, they had great success with that first single. And it set us a little bit on our heels as to how we could repeat that. So we ended up becoming part of the EMI system, which at the time had a company called Virgin Records that took several of our artists, mainly DC Talk at first, into their systems and promoted them to the mainstream. And DC Talk had some good success there with Between You and Me and a couple other songs. So.
Was that a type of deal where you sold it to, I guess, EMI at the time?
We did. We sold it 100% on the very first day.
Wow.
We felt like that was the right thing to do. You know, there were all different kinds of scenarios, but we felt like, well, if we're going to do this, we really want to be part of the family. And Bill Hearn, I give him a lot of credit for it, and his dad, Billy Ray, was still around, and they had sold Sparrow to EMI. And then EMI had purchased our distributor, which was a major in those days, called Star Song. And Star Song is just an imprint today, you know, as I guess Forefront is too. But Bill Hearn really wanted to build something special that could be a center for artist development, I felt like, and use the resources of a major entertainment company like EMI, you know, to help with that. And so it started with Sparrow, then it was Star Song, then it was Forefront, then it was Tooth and Nail, then it was Partigo Tea, and then, you know, a couple others. And so we became a hub for all that sort of thing.
It's awesome.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
And then EMI Christian Music Publishing. Tell us about how you entered into that, because you were DeGarmo and Key, and then you were running a record label, and now you're
So I hung up my
become the top publisher.
I hung up my artist boots in '94. From '91 to '94, I worked at Forefront through the week and toured Thursday through Sunday with D&K. And something had to give because I was never home. And my lovely wife, we've been married 45 years. She claims it's only 22 and a half because I was gone so much. So, and she's probably right.
Probably right, yeah.
Making up for that now, right?
Now making up for it. So I left Forefront. Dan Brock, my friend and partner, at the end of our employment agreements with EMI when we sold Forefront, he really wanted to do something different. And he felt very strongly that both of us should leave together. We started the business together. We left together. So I left Forefront in '99. And interesting, and this is a hand of God stuff. I don't think I'm smart enough to figure this one out. But when you sell a business, normally you have a provision that doesn't allow you to compete with the business that you sold for a period of time. Right? So I couldn't go back in the label business. But I had carved out, excuse me, I got a burp. I had carved out an exclusion on the music publishing business.
Wow.
And in my employment contract, in our sales agreement with EMI, I was allowed to be a music publisher, but not a label, for another period of time. So I formed a music publishing business in 1999, just an independent business called Mo Music, M-E-A-U-X. It's the original spelling of DeGarmo, D-E-G-A-R-M-E-A-U-X. But it was also really easy to trademark, you know.
Yeah.
But I also, coming from Memphis, it made Mo Music, Mo Barbecue, Mo Money.
Yeah.
You know, it all made sense. So that's where it went. And in those early days of Mo Music, I was still involved with a couple of artists that I had signed at Forefront. Signed a 12-year-old girl named Stacey Arico that Bill Hearn asked me if I would continue to help her make her records, you know. And he had got me involved with a couple other big projects over there. As an executive producer, there was a mini-series project that came out in the MIIM called Jesus. It was a worldwide project in conjunction with the Vatican that was a motion picture all over the world and a mini-series on CBS television here for 3 nights. You know, big deal.
Yeah.
And we did soundtracks, and you know, and it was very mainstream driven. You know, Leanne Rimes, we had a big song with her called I Need You. That was a #1 song in 98 Degrees, and Hootie and the Blowfish, you know, before we knew Darius Rucker's name, you know, but it was all very mainstream. And that project got me pretty involved with some folks that I hadn't known yet from New York and different folks like that. So when I formed the music publishing business, it helped me on that level. And also, I was very drawn, being once a record producer, I was very drawn to working with record producers. And so I started managing producers. You know, people like Ted Chernholm and Pete Stewart and Robert Marvin, I did not manage him, but I did publish him, and 2 or 3 others, Mookie Taylor. And so I formed this small business, and we did 2 things. We managed music producers, and we published their songs. And one of the songs that I published was written by a fellow named Mark Bird called God of Wonders. And that was my introduction to worship music. I didn't know anything about it. Well, it wasn't popular when we were a band, you know, in the church. And I knew very little about it. And so Bill Hearn called me one day, and he goes, Eddie, he said, you're like killing me with this Mo music thing, you know. I mean, seriously, he's like, you're signing all my writers, and you know, and I hate you now. So,
what did that like? So I mean, just the Mark Bird thing. Was he just one of your writers that you had signed at the time? And was that with any intention of like breaking into the worship space, or you just didn't even know it at the time?
No, it was a Forrest Gump moment. It just happened, and the song blew up. Third Day recorded it, and Steve Hendelong produced it, and I think co-wrote the song with Mark. And Mark's, I don't know if you know Mark. He's a very, very good songwriter. And so we had some other success with some other songs, and Mark was also a recording artist. He and his wife did a group together called Glass something, but they were recorded on Word. And Mark was from an alt-rock band in the early 90s called Common Children. So he'd been around the block a little bit. But Mo grew to about, 15 songwriters or something like that. Wow. And about half of them were music producers. And I had a staff that was working on Mo. And I was also, creating this stage musical called Hero out of Mo. That's something I always wanted to do. And Bill Hearn called me and he says, hey, can we have lunch? And so I met with him and he said, man, I got this idea. He said, why don't you come in and run our music publishing business? And he said, there's this new genre of music called worship music. And he said, we're just kind of getting off the ground with it, with Delirious, And he said, I don't know a lot about it. And I said, well, I don't know anything about it much. He said, you'll do fine. Yeah,
that was literally the conversation.
That was the conversation. He said, you'll do fine. And
it's amazing. Genre-defining moments that are like, you'll figure it out.
You'll figure it out. And so... and I said, well, look, I got this business, Mo. And he goes, well, and I said, I don't want to sell it. It's only 3 years old. And he said, well, just run them both. So that's what I did. Mm-hmm. I thought that was pretty smart at the time because I had 2 different staffs. I had a staff with Mo and I had a staff with EMI. And the thing I didn't really think through very well was just the personal cost of what it took to run those 2 businesses, and felt like that even though they were both successful, all I did was work, And so it was about 3 or 4 years later that EMI bought Mo as well. So I sold them 2 businesses. Anyway, and stayed at EMI, and right when I got there, Rick Kua, that worked in the department at first, he came and he said, look, we've started this web program called Worship Together. And he said, we do these little conferences here and there. And he said, we have like 70,000 people that belong to this. And I was like, 70,000 people? And he's like, yeah, man, it's really big.
Wow.
And I said, well, what do you do? And he said, we just kind of put their songs out there. Radio stations won't play their music. So I was pretty acquainted with that, because I went through it with D&K and went through it with DC Talk and Audio Adrenaline and others. And radio did not play worship music in those days. A lot of it was recorded live. A lot of the quality of the recordings weren't up to what their standards were and that sort of thing. And EMI had entered into negotiations, had not closed the deal yet, with a British company called Thank You Music. And one of the first things I got to do was be part of bringing Thank You Music into EMI, and had writers like Matt Redman and Tim Hughes and Stuart Townend and Keith Getty and these guys that were doing this thing from the UK and from Europe before it had really gotten over here in that way. There were other kinds of worship music in America, but it was more MOR, what Integrity Music was doing with Hosanna and some of that sort of thing. These guys were doing more rock band worship, for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
But that's kind of what it was. And writing fantastic songs. And so back to the Worship Together thing, that was a program that was started before I got there. I got to be part of watching it grow and trying to figure out how to make it grow. And when I left Capital, as it was called, in 2014, we had transitioned from EMI to Capital. It's a whole other story. But we had almost 800,000 members who worship together.
It's amazing.
Wow.
And it's interesting. It's not a consumer website. It's really what you call in business a B2B, business to business, because those members were worship leaders around the world that accessed our program to find what they wanted to sing next Sunday. That was basically the mantra.
Yeah. So you had built the entire pipeline with that, man. And I think there's just something really big there in that whole. It doesn't sound like you had any sort of training or somebody sat you down and said, okay, this is everything you need to know about worship music. This is everything you need to know about running a publishing company. This is everything.
No, I didn't. I had some mentors along the way. Richard Green, music attorney, definitely mentored me and taught me the business side of things. And, back from Richard and I started working together in 1981. He was D&K's manager. And then he became D&K's attorney, then became Forefront's attorney, and then he became general counsel at EMI. So I learned a lot of the business acumen from him, But I've usually found that people are good at stuff, can be good at a lot of stuff, and you can't be any better than the people that you surround yourself with, and I would joke with my staff, if other people aren't trying to hire you, maybe I don't have the best person, because you should be sought after. And then I got to figure out a way to make you happy to stay with me.
Yeah. You want to be fighting to keep your people,
Yeah, you do, because you want the best people. And if you can multiply yourself exponentially through having even better people than you, it's amazing what you can do.
Yeah. Well, that's another thing that I hear in your story is just these relationships that carry over from business to business, from era to era, from Richard Green as band attorney to label attorney. I hear whether it's a loyalty or just an importance in keep those relationships. Like, just you don't need you're not hopping around a lot in terms of that.
I think relationships are probably the most important thing in business and in life. And then the second, and we could probably prioritize these differently, but you have to bring value to a business relationship for people to want to work with you, And I think the reason that I was able to keep Toby Mack, he and I had a business relationship from day one through the day that I walked out of the office. Somebody like that, and he's a really smart guy, but is that he always felt like that I had his back, and I always brought value to the relationship. And it's a give and take. Sometimes you have to say there ain't no more money. You got it all. There's no more to give.
Yeah.
And I got to have a little bit too.
Yeah.
But, I think transparency and relationship are really in value, are really important in building long-term loyalty,
Yeah.
And I consult people now from time to time, and I've done some really, I think, awesome things since I've been out of the office. And usually when you're negotiating with very smart people, I find that transparency is really important. Just you don't want to find out that there's something you didn't know, and you want people to trust you, you just say, look, here's my cards. Here's all I got. Show me your cards. Show me all you got.
Yeah.
You know, and then maybe we can find a way to work together. But if we can't, that's okay too. And, you know, that's where I went with that sort of thing. And as a result, I did have very long relationships.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, I can tell that for sure. Yeah.
So it's important.
So good. It is important.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you see it in the book too. I mean, I'm just going to do a little, everybody needs to
Get the book.
Which comes out, June
26th.
June 26th.
We'll link it in our description under the video. You can buy it straight from there.
There's so many amazing stories, and I was saying today how it feels like it's like a history lesson of the Christian music industry, and I just think that everybody that's in the industry should definitely read it, because you will learn so much about not only about your story, but what it takes to be an artist, what it takes to be a songwriter, a business person in the industry. So it was a really good book.
Well, thank you. And it's my story and it's my family's story. And I feel very honored and very blessed that I was allowed to be part of this industry. And watch it grow, complete with all of its awards and issues and different things that, not unlike the church itself. I mean, we see those kind of things no matter where we go. So, and was able to find some good success in a lot of different places in the industry.
Well, it's definitely been, for me, it's been an honor to, get a chance to work with you and just be a part of some really amazing moments in the industry. So it was fun to read.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
So can you talk about this idea of your 4-year commitment principle? What is that?
Well, when Susan and I, my wife, my lovely wife, there's a little bit of history I've got to go back into a little bit. Yeah. That we had been married for about, she says 9 months and 15 minutes, and when we had our first baby, actually it might have been more like 9 months and 5 minutes.
Yeah.
But anyway, it was pretty quick. So we had our first baby. We were married at 19.
Wow.
And had our first child the first year of marriage. And I had to do what any father has to do. I had to support my family, So I got a job doing construction work, which I literally hated. And over the course of a couple of years, I built kind of a successful business doing construction work that I hated. But at the same time, I got pretty embittered by it all, felt like, well, God, didn't you call me to be a rock star? That's like a lot more fun, and I'm getting up at 5 a.m. and digging ditches, And so I went through, and my family went through with me, a period of time that was very difficult, to where that got up to go to work one morning and I couldn't walk. And turned out I had ruptured some disc in my spine, and this is in the middle ages of back surgery, dark ages of back surgery, in 1975, 76 era, and was hospitalized and on my back for almost a year. And whatever little bit we had in our life, we lost. I had to move in with my parents, which was very, humbling, to say the least. And Susan got a job at a mortgage company, and I was taking care of our little girl and living with my parents, just thinking, what in the world has happened to me, And it was that period of time that God worked in my heart probably more than any other time in my life, when I had an epiphany, I call it, which was kind of a reckoning with God, to where that I felt like that God was showing me. He said, Eddie, he said, all those things that you thought stood in your way of serving me, he said, good news is you got nothing left, man. You got nothing to lose. So now you can do what I asked you to do, because there's no fear. And it was pretty freeing, really. And so Dana Key, my partner, had actually come to me and he said, man, I think we ought to get the band back together. He said, you know, we did some great stuff and saw some people's lives get changed along the way, and, you know, I think we ought to get back together. And so I went to Susan and said, sweetie, you know, Dana wants to get the band back together, but I don't want to do this unless we're in this together. And so we came to this plan that was what we call our 4-year plan. There was some basis to that. At that point in time, the Small Business Administration basically put out their materials that if you don't have 3 years to dedicate to a business, that you're more apt to fail, you know. And so we decided to give it 4. And we were like, whatever it takes, if I got to work 3 jobs, if Susan has to work, you know, whatever it takes, if we got to live here, we got to live there, you know, we're going to give this thing everything we've got for 4 years. Now, at the time, you know, we were on welfare and food stamps.
Wow.
Oh, yeah. Living with my mom and dad. Wow. We had nothing, you know. And it took just about every second of 4 years for us to be able to at least feed our kids without having to do construction or that. But, you know, at the end of 4 years, we were going to reassess where we were, but we were going to do whatever it took. I think it's a good lesson for anybody, especially in the entertainment business or in any business, really. You have to dedicate yourself to a period of time that, you know, because you're not going to find quick success, usually. Sometimes you do, but not usually. And so if you're not willing to do what it takes, and it may be working at Starbucks, you know. I would have songwriters come to me all the time, or artists, and say, man, can't you help me where I don't have to work at Starbucks? And I said, well, why would I want to do that? I said, I don't want to change that part of your life. I kind of like it that you don't want to work there anymore. I kind of get that, you know, but I don't want you to get in debt with me to the extent that it's going to, you know, it's kind of like college debt that 3 years down the road you're going to, you know, be in a hole that's going to be difficult to dig out of. I would rather you be bivocational and do what it takes, and let's have success together, you know. And that doesn't mean I can't help you some. I can help you some, you know, and I would. But I don't think it's wrong to be bivocational, and that means holding 2 jobs. Well, you start any business, well, you get it off. Chances are, if you guys look at your own careers, there was a time in your life you did that.
I did.
You know?
Well, mine was very parallel to yours. As an artist, I never, and I'm guessing that first 4 years was about DeGarmo and Key. So 4 years into that, for me, when I was doing the artist thing, I was paying my bills by producing records.
Well, there you
so
go.
I was doing the exact same thing.
Same thing, different way.
And that's how I got into it. Got introduced to. Funny enough, this is where the stories are so. And I almost get goosebumps just thinking about it, because you were involved in, obviously, with Forefront, and just looking at this list of, you know, DC Talk, Audio Adrenaline, Jeff Moore in the Distance. All 3 of those were probably within my first 5 records that I owned ever.
How about that?
And the only one that's not on the list is Newsboys, Take Me to Your Leader, but Star Song, and that was all kind of within the same family. So, but going back to the point of, you know, that 4-year commitment, I think so many people nowadays, and I don't know if you could speak to this, but it's the YouTube generation, it's the American Idol generation, where, you know, whether it's entitlement or just access, I don't know, or ease of, but people don't really seem to understand that.
A lot of people don't, you know, and I actually talk about this in the book as well, as what I would look for in an artist when I would sign them, you know.
Can we dive into that? Because
Yeah, sure.
I'd love to. I mean, obviously, we'll read the book and.
Well, from
everybody
a creative perspective, I would categorize it in 3 different areas: songwriting, virtuosity, and charisma. You know, and you can have an artist that's such a great songwriter that they don't necessarily have to, be a virtuoso, and they don't have to maybe have what we would think of as charisma, or the world actually might call sex appeal, if you will, And that songwriter might be Bob Dylan. Bob Dylan's not the best singer in the world, although he's easy to recognize. And his charisma he's just kind of aloof. And nothing disrespectful, but he's such a great songwriter, the other two categories aren't important. You can have the same thing with a virtuoso, somebody like, Josh Groban, or somebody, or Celine Dion. Celine Dion, or there's a plethora of people we could talk about, but their talent is so extreme that they don't have to be a great songwriter. They don't have to necessarily, look like a poster child, because their talent is so extreme. And then you can have a person that is so doggone beautiful, or have so much charisma, if they're not beautiful, that maybe they're not a great songwriter, and they're not, necessarily a virtuoso. Pop music generates some of those types of artists, teenage pop for sure, to where it's really more about the image and the poster, and somebody else creates the music, if you will.
Sure.
We've all seen that. So that's from a talent side. So I would try to identify what was important on the talent side. Then there's a whole nother side that's all about fortitude and integrity and character. And an artist that has fortitude, integrity, and character can eclipse a lot of the talent side. Because they work hard, because they show up, because they can be trusted, and they want it more than you do. They have to want it more than you.
Yeah.
And we've all worked with artists that we kind of want it more than them sometimes. That makes it very difficult.
Yeah.
But when they want it more than you, and they have good character and good integrity, that to me, in some respects, and a lot of respects, was more important than the talent side. I found in my career I could take somebody with high character further than I could somebody with low character and high talent. So I would always sign character before talent. Now, the key is, if you can find somebody with high character that's very talented, the stars are the limit.
Yeah.
That's what you want.
Yeah. How do you judge that? Because you obviously have to judge that rather quickly.
Well, you do. I mean, you can usually take a few meetings with somebody, and you can kind of tell about who they are as a person. Talent's pretty subjective.
Yeah.
And depending on the genre of music that you're addressing, some of us may think something's talented in a different way than what others might. To me, the most important thing talent-wise was really to be recognizable and identifiable, if you will. I used Dylan as an example, but, we all know it's him when he sings. And, Johnny Cash, we all know it's him when he sings. Eminem, we kind of all know it's him when he raps.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And if you can find somebody that's that identifiable, I think it helps you immensely in the marketing aspect of music. Because people can latch on to who it is, whether or not if they like it. You have to remember, the cancer of art is indifference. You want to spark an emotion, and sometimes it can be just as powerful if they hate you, as if they love you.
Yeah.
Sometimes it can be.
Yeah.
And so we've seen that in all of our different artists we go to. That's the wonderful thing about art, is that it can be something that one person likes and the other person despises.
Yeah, it's polarizing. Well, I've got so many questions. I know Stacy has so many questions that we probably can't even fit them all into one interview, but let's just go through our last 5, which we call the Full Circle 5. So first one being, what is the book that you most commonly recommend to people?
Oh my gosh.
Besides from this one.
That's pretty funny. That's pretty funny. Well, I mean, this is going to sound like a pat answer, but it's really not. I think as a faith-based person that you need to know what the Scripture teaches you about how to live. That's extremely important, because if you don't know, you can't necessarily be expected, to you can't be really expected to live out a life that's pleasing to God if you don't know what He expects, if you will. So I think that's very important. I'm an avid reader. I just finished reading the Martin Luther biography by Eric Metaxas, which is kind of like reading a math book. But that would be my book today, because as great as Luther was, he had his own faults. But he's the guy most responsible for the Reformation. There's an old business book called In Search of Excellence that I think is a great book. That teaches us a lot about image and what people perceive you to be. That's really important, especially when you're building an artist career that's a public platform career. For example, a good thing I used to think about, depending on where the audience perceives you coming from, is how they will receive you or reject you many times. For example, if you were to take the great Billy Graham, and if he were to come, if he were still alive and say he was 50 years old, and he went to his board and he says, man, I think I want to do some business seminars. I don't really want to preach. I just want to talk about good business. All right? Nothing wrong with that at all. But a lot of people would have thought of that, well, why is he walking away from the gospel? And they would have had a negative impression, I think, out of that move. Whereas if you take somebody on the mainstream side, and this, I'm not picking on anybody, but, Jay-Z. And Jay-Z says, man, I've been thinking about this. Oh, like God, I don't know why I've been saying this stuff. I want to talk more about that. You would find the Christian audience would say, oh my gosh, what's happened with Jay-Z?
Yeah.
We want to hear more.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or a plethora of pop stars, I mean, look what's happened in just the media with Kanye West taking a stand on conservative politics, which is nothing extraordinary other than from where he is perceived to come from.
Yeah.
You see?
Yeah.
And so the conservative people have really embraced his stand. I'm not sure they would embrace a lot about Kanye, but they embrace that, Maybe they would. I don't want to sell him short, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So Perception in Search of Excellence talks a lot about that and those kinds of things and the way that the audience and the public perceives you. And so I think that's a good book.
So good. We'll have to get that
Yeah, we'll need to
read it all together.
I think I actually have that.
That's an old one.
I'm pretty sure you gave that one to me. So.
Probably did.
I've heard that not all readers are leaders, but all leaders are readers. So have you always been one?
I have. I have. I've been an avid reader most of my life. I became an extreme reader in my touring years on a tour bus.
Yeah. You got lots of time.
Got lots of time, And so I still read every day, every night before I go to bed, I'll read for 30 minutes or an hour, something. And sometimes it's just mindless.
Yeah.
David Baldacci or something.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'd like to talk a little bit about, because we've heard obviously a lot about a lot of the wins, and you touched briefly on that period of food stamps and living in the parents' basement, but I've got a question about failure. Failure obviously can turn into a great thing in our lives if it changes our perspective or behavior on the way we, act or something. So in that sense, do you have a favorite failure?
Oh my gosh. A favorite failure. That's like a double F.
Alliteration for our songwriter audience.
That's right. There was, coming from Memphis, I was always a fan of blues music. And early in Forefront, I signed a couple artists that did that kind of music. One dear friend, he's passed away now, named Larry Howard. And Larry played blues guitar in a rock band called Grinder Switch. And he had a voice that kind of sounded like Ray Charles, if you will. And so I did a couple records on him that just had no success whatsoever, So that was a good failure story about, it wasn't that I was making bad music, it was about that the marketplace wasn't willing to accept the music that I was making, And I mean, we talked a little bit about that you have to be willing to shake hands with your audience at a certain level. And the intelligent artist is flexible enough to understand what that means. I've worked with some artists, and I know I'm straying from the question a little bit, but I've worked with some artists that are like, no, man, this is how I do it. This is it. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that. And there's a place for all that. But then there's a place to understand, once you commercialize your art, you're going to respond to the audience. It's human nature. You're going to respond to what people will pay for, which is very different than what you create sometimes. And so I think if you get people like you and the rest of these people around you and want to commercialize your art, so that you can do it again next year and the year after, make a living at it, if you will, you have to respond to the audience. So anyway, I responded to the audience. I had to drop Larry Howard.
Yeah.
I signed another artist, a great friend of mine named Michael Anderson. Made a couple records on him. He had a couple big country hits back in the early 90s. And I think I made fantastic records on them. And I mean, they sold pitifully, People would ask me from time to time, well, how did you become so successful? Well, I was really only successful like 51% of the time. That's okay.
Yeah.
That's a pretty good track record.
But, if you're successful more than you're not successful, I think you can usually find a way through. And I have found that successful people are very flexible in understanding their failures and how to change course, alter a little bit about what you do, to become successful. And, to that point, when artists would come and sit with me and say, can you help me? Well, what do you want me to help you do? Well, can you help me, sell a lot of CDs or downloads or stream or whatever today, but, well, yeah, but you're going to have to respond to the audience somehow. And if you're not willing to do that, I'd say that's commendable, but don't quit your daytime job. Just do it, and you can paint or create whatever you want to create.
Yeah.
You don't have to worry about it. And you certainly don't need some knothead like me telling you what to do.
Yeah.
So...
Good. So before you dove fully in, and this is a little bit of a strange question because it sounds like you were kind of always in, maybe barring that period of construction in your life, but was there one thing that you could identify that maybe held you back in that season? Like why did you do that season? Why did you do construction and not just go full in on music the whole time?
Well, I got married really young. And, I'm absolutely in love with my wife, and we've been married 45 years. And I think she, has been the rock that's carried me through a lot of this. But it's easier many times on a financial level if you're single, I think, especially when you're starting businesses and that sort of thing. So once you make a decision that you're going to bring your family into it, your responsibilities shift a little bit, and they should. They should shift a little bit. And, to that end, I would encourage artists, don't drag your family down, don't put a noose around their neck and take them to the bottom of the river. You got to know when to fold them.
Yeah.
And there's a time.
Yeah.
That was back to my 4 years. If we couldn't have figured out a way to support our family in that period of time, I was okay to fold them. Somewhere in there's a question.
Yeah. No, that's good. That you answered it very well. So, on the other side of this, all you're writing a book, you're doing all this stuff, you're consulting with people. What is something that is working for you right now?
Oh my gosh! Well, when I left Capitol in 2014, when I turned 60, and my boss said to me, "Why in the world would you leave this job? You're on top of the industry." I said to him, "Mary, I remember this conversation very clearly." I said, my father passed away at 70. I have an older brother that passed away at 67. As much as I love you, I don't want to be sitting here when that happens. I want to spend time with my family. And I have 5 wonderful grandkids, 2 great daughters, and I've been able to really focus, I think, in with them in a cool way in the last 4 years that I wasn't able to do before. I went back and finished my college education. I graduated with a Bachelor of Arts and walked across the platform and accepted my diploma in front of my 5 grandkids. I dropped out to chase music in 76.
Yeah.
I promised my mom I would do it. Well, she's like, "Son, you better finish school." And she's been gone for a lot of years, but I could still see that wagging finger. Yeah. So when I had time to go back to school, I did, because I made a promise. And I wanted to fulfill my promise to her, so I graduated. And just kind of hanging out and talking to people like you.
Yeah. It's good. Well, the last question that we always ask, I'm not even sure how in the world it could apply to you, because it feels like you've just achieved such a level of success but I'll just ask it anyway and see what your response is, because you always give great responses. So if you woke up tomorrow morning, still possessed all the knowledge and relationships and experiences that you have, but your entire business or industry, it all just kind of went away, and you had to start from scratch, and you could do anything that you want, what would you do?
Anything that I want?
Yeah.
That's always a problem. That's always a problem. Options can be a curse. They can be. And, I don't know. If I could do anything, to sound hyper spiritual, and I don't want to soapbox on it, but what's important to me in my life today is, at the end of my days, for God to say, "Well done, good and faithful servant." That's very important to me.
That's good.
I've been way more successful than I ever dreamed I would be, and I never got in Christian music to make money, but I've made way more money than I ever thought was conceivable, And so I'm not driven by those kinds of things the same way. I want to make a genuine impact in people's lives. One thing I found in this book that I've worked with a lot of people from different backgrounds through the years, and I've sent them this book, and it's kind of a personal testimony and witness. It's a Christian book. My story, Jesus changed my life, so this story has a lot to do with that. And I found that even folks from different backgrounds respond to that part of it pretty positively, and I love that part.
Yeah.
If I was going to do anything, most of my success in my career, I'll say this, has been from the ability to see what is not there. And look around wherever, whatever you make, whatever your job is, if you want to be in business, look around at what's not there. When I signed Rebecca St. James, Rebecca Smallbone was her name. Specifically, I was looking to sign an artist that spoke to their peers that was a girl, because all of the artists in Christian music at that time were in their mid to late 30s. Like, where can I find a 15-year-old, 14-year-old that can speak to their peers? When we signed DC Talk, it was all about doing hip-hop to a group of audience that were fans of that, and it didn't really exist in Christian music. When I discovered Skillet, it was like, oh my gosh, first of all, John Cooper is the ultimate maniac. That is the perfect guy that's going to bug me at 3 a.m. because he can't find his CD in Walmart somewhere. And you know what I mean? Because you got to have that.
Sounds like him.
You got to have that.
Well, he wants it more than you, right?
That's
Go
right.
back to that.
That's
That's
good.
right. Yeah.
And he's got a voice that, like it or hate it, we don't argue about who it is. And, he's just passionate as you can be. And, I think it's going to work because it's not an option for it not to with him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so find what's not there and try to build your value around that. And I think that's a big key to what God has allowed me to be part of. When I started in a Christian rock band, at least in the South, we didn't know it existed. We were doing something that didn't exist. When I started a Christian record company, there really wasn't a record label that was totally focused on this one age group of people. Not a style as much as it's an age group. Because we had hip hop and rock and all points in between. And, when I got in the independent publishing business, there really wasn't anybody in Christian music. It existed in pop and country, for sure, that worked with music producers and helped them maximize their songwriting efforts. And so what I did worked out.
So good. Well, we do encourage all of our listeners and viewers to check out your book. How can people interact with you on? So you're actually pretty active on social media. I follow you on there.
Well, active is probably a push, but I am on there.
How can people find you on there? What's your handle?
Oh my gosh! Well, you can certainly find me on Facebook. Just Eddie DeGarmo.
All right.
And on Facebook, and I'm not the best Twitter guy in the world.
Okay.
Occasionally, I do a little Instagram.
You're on Instagram.
Yeah, you're on Instagram. I follow you on Instagram.
And the book is available everywhere now.
Great.
You can't get it until June 26th, but you can certainly order it. So it's out there, and the publisher is taking it wide around the world. They're a large publisher, so
yeah. Great. Well, thank you so much. This has been just an absolute joy, and I wish we could sit here all day and ask you questions, but I know you're a busy man and got family to get home to.
I'm not as busy as you. I'm not near as busy. There was a time.
Well, we're in a different. I'm in a different part of my career, but thank you so much for.
Well, thank you.
Just being so generous with your stories and knowledge and wisdom, and again, I am personally really excited to read this. Stacy's already vouched.
This is yours
for it. So, all right.
So there you go.
There you go. Awesome.
Thanks.
Well, thank you so much, Eddie.
All right. Thank you.